Hey YouTube, Shelko04 here. So I thought I'd change the venue up a bit and not record today in the RV. So I'm out in the blaring sun. Anyway, I know the title of this video was Preppers versus Zombies, and that was sort of to draw you in. And we'll get to that in a minute. What I want to talk to you about is the food supply in your community. Now, where I'm sitting out in the middle of the desert here, we've got a town over that way that's just round numbers, let's say 40,000 in population. Now, we'll come back to that in a moment. Let's talk about the human body. The male human body requires between 1,500 and 2,000 calories a day. The female human body requires between 1,200 and 1,500 calories a day. Now, where I'm sitting right now, nothing is grown here anymore. All the food comes from outside. How far outside? Well, I looked on the internet. And our closest distribution center is a Walmart distribution center that's located in Albuquerque. It's 230 miles north of here. The other distribution centers beyond that are Dallas and Phoenix. So our bread, our eggs, our cheese, our milk comes from a very, very far distance. Again, keep in mind, the population of the community here is about 40,000. Now, what does that mean? If we're not growing our food here and relying on outside sources for our food, that means in the event of a SHTF situation, and maybe the supply trucks aren't going to make it down here at all, or maybe there's some sort of national emergency whereby the trucks only come down twice a month or something, you're looking at immediate food shortages. And next time you go to the store, make note of how little basically is sitting on the shelves there. They say there's a 3-day supply of food sitting on the shelves. And what happens is 3 days later, after what's sitting on the shelves has gone away, the truck shows up, resupplies it, life goes on. That's called just-in-time supply chain. So let's use some fun numbers here. And these are all hypothetical, but I think you'll get my point. I was thinking about the population here of 40,000. And I thought 10%, what's that give me? Well, that gives me 4,000. And I'll tell you, sure as shit as I'm sitting here, there are not 4,000 preppers in this community. So then I started thinking about 1%. What's that get you? Well, that gets you something closer to 400, and I think that is still on the high side. But if we go to 1/10 of 1%, then that makes the math a little harder for me in my example. So let's just say, for sake of argument, that there are 400 preppers in this community. Let's use that 1% again and say in an SHTF situation whereby we are offline for a week or more, or there's some sort of, again, situation where communities are forced to hunker in place, well, you know, there's always talk about how the first group of people to die will be the ones who are medically dependent, whether it's on insulin or some sort of breathing device or oxygen or what have you. So let's say that's that 1%. 400 people just died in those 2 weeks. Now, my concern is, and I've been reading a lot about this, if we've got 40,000 people here, and our closest food source is 230 miles away, and we are not growing food here at all anymore. If the food runs out, and it's a long-term SHTF situation, it's not going to be the zombies that I think you have to worry about. I think of that 40,000 population, again, if we extrapolate out what 1% is willing to do, I would say you have to worry about 400 people turning into cannibals, basically, willing to eat other people. Think about that for a minute. What percentage of your population in your community do you think would be willing to eat another person in the event of a dire SHTF situation where the food supply was completely cut off. Here, like I said, I bet it's between 40, 1/10 of 1%, and 400. And what do I base that on? Well, we all know the story about the Donner Party, right? And how after a while they were forced to, after they ate their mules and boiled their shoes and what have you, they were forced to basically eat their dead. And we've heard about that Argentinian rugby team in the 70s that the movie and the book Alive was based on, and how they basically were forced to result in cannibalism. Also, a little known fact is during World War II, in the South Pacific, the little islands that the Japanese were hunkered down on and really taking a stand on. After the American forces conquered those islands and went in to inspect the aftermath, what they discovered was the dead Chinese that were laying around had their calves missing. And that's because apparently the calf muscle is the most desirable to eat. So it's not like we are beyond it as a society as far as eating one another. And I dare say if you've got 3 kids and are used to sitting in a cubicle and suddenly the food stops coming in, that after a while you might start getting a little desperate. So what are you as a prepper to do? I don't know. I think the best advice would be to know your enemy and to know where your food supply is coming from and to be able to identify when that food supply gets disrupted. And maybe set some mental waypoints about what you're going to do when the truck doesn't show up for a week. Maybe you go into Walmart and ask, is it ever coming back? If it's not, maybe you leave. Maybe you go to your alternate hide site. Or maybe you start boarding up your windows because eventually your neighbors are going to start grabbing for that deer rifle and looking for you. And they're either going to take your stuff or they're going to take your calves. That's just my thought. So if you have any questions or comments, please leave them down below. Again, unfortunately, I don't have any solutions to this. It's just something I've become aware of. What I encourage you to do is to go on to go on the internet and do a Google search for preppers and cannibalism, and you'll see that a lot of people are starting to talk about it, and there's a lot of concern about it. But like I said, please subscribe, leave comments, and we'll talk to you later. Shelko04 out. Thanks. Bye.